blind date disaster? The mechanic walked in. The paralyzed female CEO never expected to smile again. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The soft hum of dinner conversations filled the elegant restaurant in downtown Chicago. Golden lights spilled across white tablecloths, glinting off crystal glasses and silver cutlery. Every movement felt rehearsed, every smile practiced. But at a corner table near the window, Clara Wynn's hands trembled around the stem of her glass. The reflection on the window reminded her of who she had become, a woman who could no longer stand, who arrived everywhere in silence and wheels. She had told herself she was ready for this blind date. Her assistant had set it up, insisting she needed to feel normal again. But as the minutes stretched on, Clara's hope wilted. The man she was supposed to meet had already texted an excuse, something about an emergency. She stared at the message until the words blurred, then let the phone drop into her lap. Outside, rain began to tap against the glass. Her driver was nowhere in sight, and the restaurant entrance sat at the top of a small slope that her motorized chair struggled to climb. She was still figuring out how to live in a world built for standing people. That was when a shadow crossed the glass. A tall man, in a grease-stained jacket, jogged past the row of cars and stopped near the awning. His hair was damp, his sleeves rolled, his boots streaked with oil. He looked completely out of place among the suits and gowns. But when he saw Clara struggling with her chair at the curb, he hesitated only a moment before walking toward her. "Need a hand, ma'am?" His voice carried the steady calm of someone used to fixing broken things. Clara's pride rose before gratitude. "No, I am fine," she said quickly, fumbling with the controls. The wheel caught on a crack in the pavement, jerking to one side. The chair stalled, her face flushed. The man crouched down beside her, not touching anything without asking. "Mind if I take a look?" "I fix cars, not chairs, but metal is metal." She hesitated, then nodded once. He studied the wheel, loosened a small bolt with his bare fingers, and nudged it back into place. The motor hummed again. "There," he said softly. "You are good to go." Clara blinked, surprised by the ease of it and by the warmth in his smile. "Thank you. That was quick." He shrugged, wiping his hands on a rag. Sometimes it is not the machine, just a bit of pressure in the wrong place. His eyes lifted to hers, steady and kind. "Happens to people too." For the first time in months, Clara laughed, a small, startled sound that felt strange and wonderful all at once. "I am Ethan," he said, extending his hand. She shook it carefully, the contact brief but grounding. "Clara," she replied. "Nice to meet you, Clara. You have got a strong chair. Whoever built it knew what they were doing." She smiled faintly. "I should hope so. My company designed it." His brows lifted. "You build these?" "In a way," she said, dodging the truth. "I work in management." The rain softened to a mist. He held the restaurant door open for her as she rolled inside. The warmth hit her face, carrying the scent of coffee and fresh bread. "Thank you again," she murmured. "No trouble," he said, glancing toward the parking lot. "Your driver should check those wheels regularly. City curbs are rough on joints." "I will remember that." He gave a small nod, then stepped back into the drizzle. She watched him go, the sound of his boots fading against the wet pavement. Clara's chest felt light. The night had begun with disappointment, yet a stranger had managed to make her smile again. She did not even know his last name. But somewhere deep inside, a quiet thought took root. A thought she had not dared entertain since the accident. Maybe, just maybe, she was not as broken as she believed. The next morning, sunlight crept through the tall windows of Clara Wynn's penthouse, overlooking the Chicago River. The city below moved fast, loud, full of life she could only watch from a distance. Her wheelchair sat near the balcony doors, a silent reminder of everything that had changed since the crash. She rolled closer to the glass and let her eyes trace the traffic far below. It had been 9 months since that night on the highway. 9 months since the car, She had designed the prototype of her company's newest electric model, spun out of control and broke her spine. The doctors called it a miracle that she survived at all. A miracle, she thought bitterly, that left her unable to walk. The elevator chimed softly behind her. Her physical therapist, Mara, stepped in carrying a clipboard and her usual warm smile. "Good morning, Clara. Ready for round 2? "Do I have a choice?" Clara said, forcing a dry laugh. Mara crouched beside her chair. "You can skip if you want, but every day we skip, we start from 0 again." Clara looked away. She hated being treated like a fragile thing, yet she also hated the effort it took to move an inch. Pain was constant, both in her body and somewhere deeper she could not name. For an hour, the apartment filled with quiet grunts, soft commands, and the squeak of rubber grips on metal bars. Clara pushed herself through each repetition. Her arms trembled, sweat sliding down her temples. When the session ended, she collapsed back into her chair, breathing hard. "You are getting stronger," Mara said. "I am getting stubborn," Clara replied. "That is different." When Mara left, silence returned, thick, heavy, and familiar. Clara rolled into her office and stared at the framed photo on her desk. Her and her father at the Wind Motors factory, both smiling, both unaware of how quickly everything could collapse. The knock at the door startled her. It was faint, uncertain. Through the intercom she heard a man's voice. "Delivery for Miss Wynne." "Oh," she frowned. "You can leave it at the front." "Sorry, ma'am, it is heavy. Better if I bring it in." She hesitated, then pressed the unlock button. The elevator doors opened, revealing Ethan Cole, holding a large box covered in grease fingerprints. He looked slightly embarrassed, standing in her spotless marble entryway. "Ethan?" she said, surprised. "Yeah. The front desk said you needed a repair on your service elevator. They called my shop." Her brows lifted. "You are a mechanic for buildings too?" He grinned. "If it has an engine, I can figure it out." He knelt beside the elevator panel, tools clinking softly. Clara watched him work, his movements precise and confident. Oil smudged his forearms, but his presence carried a calm energy that filled the quiet apartment. After a few minutes, he glanced up. "You run this place alone?" She nodded. "Mostly. I prefer it that way." "I get that," he said. "Silence can be nice, until it gets too loud." "Oh." Clara blinked, caught off guard by how easily he understood. He tightened one last screw and stood. "Should be fine now." The gear was jammed with dust. She looked at the elevator, then back at him. "You saved me twice in 1 week." He chuckled. "Lucky timing, I guess." He packed his tools, but before leaving, he hesitated. "You know, that chair of yours makes a grinding sound on the left wheel. I could take a look sometime, no charge." "Ah." Her instinct was to refuse, but something about his tone, gentle, matter-of-fact, made her nod. "Maybe. All right then." He smiled, then stepped into the elevator, disappearing behind the doors. When the hum faded, Clara sat still, staring at the faint smudge his boot had left on the floor. It had been months since anyone outside her medical team had spoken to her like a person instead of a patient. That night, she dreamt of the sound of engines, the steady rhythm that once thrilled her, now echoing like a heartbeat she was afraid to trust again. Across town, Ethan sat in his small garage behind the auto shop, surrounded by the smell of oil and metal. He pulled a worn photograph from his wallet, his mother in a hospital gown, smiling weakly. The bills were stacked on the counter beside her medicine bottles. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Maybe helping that woman with the expensive chair was not just coincidence. Maybe it was the universe giving him a sign that kindness still mattered. And somewhere high above the city, Clara turned off her lamp and whispered into the dark. "Thank you, Ethan Cole." For the first time in months, she meant the words. 2 weeks later, the morning sun slipped through pale curtains, painting the marble floors of Clara Wynn's penthouse in soft gold. The air smelled faintly of machine oil and coffee. In the corner of her living room, Ethan Cole crouched beside her wheelchair, sleeves rolled up, hands working with quiet precision. He had come back just as he promised, to fix the grinding sound on her left wheel. Clara sat nearby, pretending to read an email while stealing glances at him. It was strange having another presence in the apartment, someone who hummed under his breath while he worked. who left a trail of tools and the faint scent of the outside world. Her therapists and assistants moved like ghosts, professional and polite. Ethan was different. He was real. "You were right," he said finally, wiping his hands on a cloth. "The bearings were dry. Whoever built this chair made it like a sports car, fast but sensitive." Clara smiled faintly. "I suppose I have a weakness for speed." He looked up, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "Used to drive?" She hesitated. "Once. I was pretty good at it too." He grinned. "You have the look. Focused. The kind of person who sees the road before everyone else does." Her laugh came out softer than she expected. That is one way to describe it. When he stood, she noticed the smear of oil on his cheek, and before thinking, reached out with a napkin. "Hold still." She wiped the spot gently. Their eyes met for a heartbeat longer than polite. The silence between them shifted, no longer awkward, but alive. Ethan stepped back slightly. "Thanks," he said, clearing his throat. "I will come by next week to make sure it is still running smooth." "Do you check on all your repairs this often?" "Only the ones that matter," he said, then quickly changed the subject. "You should take this outside sometime. Let the wheels breathe." She tilted her head. "Outside?" "Yeah. There is a park 2 blocks away. Best spot in the city to watch the sunrise. You can see the lake from there." "I do not go out much," she admitted. "People stare." "Then let them," he said simply. "You survived something most people could not even imagine. You have earned the right to be seen." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, quietly, "Maybe tomorrow." The next morning, they met at dawn. The city was still half asleep, the air cool and clean. Ethan walked beside her as she rolled down the empty sidewalk, his hands in his jacket pockets. The rhythmic hum of her chair mixed with the distant cry of gulls from the lakefront. They stopped at the edge of the park. The sun was climbing over the horizon, spilling light across the water like molten gold. Clara breathed in sharply. She had not been here since before the accident. The smell of salt and the sound of waves made her chest ache with memory. Ethan pulled a thermos from his bag. "Coffee, nothing fancy." He poured some into a paper cup and handed it to her. She took it, feeling the warmth seep into her palms. "Thank you." He nodded, watching the sun rise. "You ever notice how the world gets quiet right before the light hits? Like it is holding its breath." Clara looked at him, surprised by his words. "You think like a poet, not a mechanic." He smiled. "You would be surprised how much you think when you spend your days listening to engines talk." "Oh." She laughed again, softly. The sound startled her. It had been so long since laughter felt easy. For a moment, she forgot the chair, the company, the endless board meetings that waited for her return. There was only the light, the smell of coffee, and the man who somehow made silence feel like comfort instead of punishment. When they returned to the building, she hesitated at the elevator. "Ethan," she said, "you do not have to keep coming by." He shrugged. "Maybe I like fixing things that are not broken yet." She blinked, unsure how to respond. "You are impossible." "Probably," he said with a grin. "See you soon, Clara." The doors closed behind him, leaving her alone again. But something in the air had changed. Later that evening, as she rolled through her office, she noticed the folded rag he had left on the table, the one smeared with oil and fingerprints. She should have thrown it away, but instead, she placed it in the top drawer of her desk. Outside, the wind rustled against the tall windows, carrying the faint sound of engines from the city below. For the first time since the accident, Clara felt a spark, a quiet, persistent feeling she almost did not recognize. Hope. Days turned into weeks, and the small routine between Clara Wynne and Ethan Cole began to take shape. Every morning he would arrive with a cup of strong coffee from the corner shop, his hands still smelling faintly of engine oil. Every afternoon, Clara would find some excuse to have him check another problem with her chair, the elevator, or the garage. Neither of them said it aloud, but both knew those excuses were less about repairs and more about company. Her progress with physical therapy grew noticeable. She could now lift herself from the chair to the bench with only a single bar for balance. Mara, her therapist, cheered. "You are getting there, Clara, one step at a time." But it was not the therapist who saw the first miracle. It was Ethan. That evening, he stopped by to return a wrench she had accidentally taken from his toolbox. He found her in the rehab room, gripping the railing, trembling, her jaw set with determination. Her arms shook under the effort. Then, slowly, her right leg shifted an inch. Then two. Ethan froze in the doorway, afraid to speak, afraid to break the spell. Clara gasped as her foot met the ground, weak but steady. I did it. You did, he whispered, voice full of awe. You really did. Her laughter filled the room, wild and disbelieving. For a moment she forgot the pain, the weight of all the months spent sitting still. She looked at him, eyes bright with tears. It is not much, but it is a start. It is everything, he said quietly. From that day forward, Ethan became part of her routine. He drove her to therapy, waited in the lobby, and sometimes walked beside her in the park when the weather allowed. Their conversations drifted between jokes and silences that felt like understanding. One afternoon, Clara wheeled into the garage where her old car, the one from the accident, had been stored under a tarp. Ethan followed her gaze. Is that it? She nodded. The Wind Velocity. It was supposed to be our flagship model. Safer, faster, smarter. But it nearly killed me. He approached the car carefully, peeling back the tarp. Dust floated in the sunlight. The front fender was twisted, the hood dented, but the frame remained solid. You kept it. I could not throw it away, she said. It is part of me, even if I hate what it did. Ethan ran his hand along the metal, inspecting the bolts and panels like a surgeon. It can be fixed, he said. She laughed softly. You fix everything, do you not? He smiled. I try. Over the next few days, he worked on the car in her garage, sometimes late into the night. Clara watched from the doorway, sketching designs and offering suggestions. Their teamwork felt effortless, natural. When he turned the key for the first test, the engine coughed, then roared to life. The sound made her heart pound. I never thought I would hear that again. Ethan looked at her, eyes shining. Maybe it is time to stop running from what hurt you. She stared at the car, the smell of gasoline filling the air. And for the first time, the memory of that night did not make her flinch. Standing there, with the hum of the engine and Ethan's steady presence beside her, Clara realized she was no longer just surviving. She was beginning to live again. One morning, while Ethan Cole was tightening the bolts beneath the hood of the repaired Wind Velocity, something on the engine block caught his attention. A serial number had been etched over with a different code. He frowned, wiping away the grease with his rag. Beneath the scratches, the original digits were still visible. They matched a batch he had seen before on a recall list for defective brake systems. His pulse quickened. He stepped back, staring at the car as pieces began to fall into place. The accident that left Clara Wynne paralyzed might not have been caused by driver error. It could have been the fault of her own company. When Clara rolled into the garage a few minutes later, she saw the look on his face. What is wrong? Ethan hesitated. Clara, this part here. It should not have been in your prototype. Someone replaced the original safety mechanism with an older, faulty one. I have seen these fail before. Her expression froze. That is impossible. Every component was inspected. I know what I am looking at, he said quietly. This was deliberate. She stared at the car, her heartbeat roaring in her ears. You are saying someone tampered with it? He nodded. It looks that way. Whoever did it wanted this car off the road. Clara's mind raced. She remembered the late-night meetings, the tension between executives, the way certain reports had gone missing after the crash. Her throat tightened. If what you are saying is true, then someone in my company tried to kill me. Ethan met her gaze, firm but gentle. Then we find out who. For a long moment, silence filled the garage, broken only by the steady hum of the engine cooling down. Clara looked at him, realizing he had stepped into her world without hesitation. Ethan, she whispered. If this is real, it could destroy everything my father built. He placed a hand over hers. Or it could save it, Clara. You deserve the truth. Her breath trembled, but she nodded. Then we start digging. In that quiet, charged moment, the sound of the repaired car seemed to echo with new meaning. The machine that had once symbolized her pain had now become proof that someone's greed had nearly taken her life, and that Ethan was the one man she could trust to help her uncover the truth. Over the next several days, Clara Wynne and Ethan Cole worked in secret. Her office lights stayed on late into the night as they pored over design files, supplier invoices, and maintenance records from the months before the crash. Ethan's mechanical instincts caught details that Clara had never noticed: duplicate purchase orders, mismatched batch codes, and missing signatures. Each discovery pulled her deeper into a truth she had never wanted to face. Someone inside Wynn Motors had altered her prototype before that test drive. And the only people with access to that level of clearance were the executive engineers, people she had trusted for years. At midnight, Clara found the final proof: a maintenance log digitally signed by Nathan Wynn, her half-brother and vice president of operations. The timestamp matched the night before her accident. Her hand trembled as she stared at the screen. He had the car in his possession. He changed the part himself. Ethan's jaw tightened. Why would he do that? Clara swallowed hard. Control. My father's will divided the company between us. But if I was declared unfit to serve as CEO, he would inherit everything. The words hung heavy in the quiet room. Ethan leaned closer. Then we take this to the authorities. She shook her head. If we go public now, the board will cover it up. They will say I am unstable, that the injury affected my judgment. Her eyes filled with a steady, dangerous resolve. No, I will expose him myself. Clara, I need your help, she said. You are the only one I can trust. Ethan hesitated, then nodded slowly. Whatever it takes. Together, they copied every document, every hidden file, and stored it on an external drive. When the sun began to rise over the lake, Clara closed her laptop. Her face was pale, but unbroken. He wanted to silence me, she whispered, but he gave me a reason to stand. Ethan looked at her, pride softening his voice. Then let us make sure he never gets the chance to hurt you again. Oh, as the first light filled the penthouse, Clara realized that the woman in the wheelchair was gone. In her place stood a survivor, ready to fight for truth, even if it meant losing everything else. The day of the Wynn Motors shareholders conference arrived with gray skies hanging over downtown Chicago. Clara Wynn sat before her mirror, dressed in a navy suit that fit perfectly, her hair pinned neatly behind her ears. The reflection staring back was calm, composed, but her heart was pounding like an engine before ignition. Ethan Cole waited outside the penthouse, holding a small flash drive in his hand, the evidence that could change everything. You are sure you want to do this? He asked quietly as she rolled toward him. I have to, she said. It is not just about me anymore. It is about what this company stands for. They arrived at the glass tower that bore her family's name. Cameras flashed the moment she entered the lobby. Whispers followed her down the marble hallway. Many had not seen her in person since the accident, and fewer believed she would ever return. Nathan Wynn stood near the stage, his confident smile faltering for a brief second when he saw her. Sister, he said smoothly, leaning in for a hug she did not accept. I did not expect you to attend. Clara met his gaze, her voice steady. That is because you never expected me to walk back into this building. The room fell silent as the meeting began. Nathan presented quarterly numbers, speaking of profits and innovation, painting the company as unstoppable. When he invited questions, Clara's voice cut through the silence. I have one, she said. Would you like to explain why the prototype I tested had a defective braking system that was removed from production years ago? A murmur spread through the audience. Nathan's smile wavered. I do not know what you mean. Ethan stepped forward, plugging the flash drive into the screen. Maybe this will help refresh your memory. Blueprints, timestamps, and the signed maintenance log appeared on the large monitor for all to see. Clara continued, her tone unwavering. The evidence shows that the faulty part was installed by you, Nathan. You were the only executive with clearance to access that car. The tampering caused the crash that nearly killed me. Nathan's composure cracked. You cannot prove intent, he snapped. I can prove motive, she said coldly. The night of my accident, you transferred company funds into a private account. The same night, you filed a motion to declare me unfit to lead. The room erupted with gasps and flashes from journalists' cameras. Security guards moved closer to the stage as board members whispered among themselves. Ethan stood at Clara's side, silent but firm. Nathan's face turned pale. You would destroy your own family for this? Clara's voice softened but held steel beneath. You destroyed it the moment you chose greed over blood. Two officers entered the conference room, approaching Nathan as the board chairman announced that law enforcement had already been notified. Nathan tried to protest, but his words dissolved under the weight of the evidence. As he was led away, Clara's hands trembled. The adrenaline that had fueled her now left her body shaking. Ethan placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "It is over," he said softly. But she shook her head. "No, it is just beginning." When the conference ended, reporters shouted questions, but Clara did not answer. She moved toward the exit, the flashbulbs chasing her every step. The sky outside had begun to clear, sunlight cutting through the gray. For the first time since the accident, she did not feel trapped by her chair or her past. She had faced the man who tried to destroy her and chosen truth over fear. And though her body still carried scars, her spirit stood tall, stronger than steel, brighter than the rising light over the city she loved. The news spread through Chicago within hours. CEO Clara Wynne exposes corporate sabotage, the headlines read. Her decision to go public turned her into both a symbol of courage and a target of scrutiny. Lawsuits followed, stock prices dipped, and analysts questioned whether Wynne Motors could survive the scandal. For several days, Clara avoided the press and the board alike. She stayed in her penthouse, curtains drawn, the flash of camera lights reflecting off the windows below. The adrenaline of confrontation had faded, leaving only exhaustion. She had won justice, but at a cost. Investors were pulling out, employees were anxious, and she felt the crushing weight of her father's legacy pressing down on her shoulders. Ethan Cole came by quietly, just as he always did. He did not bring flowers or speeches, just a brown paper bag with 2 sandwiches and a thermos of coffee. "You have not eaten," he said simply. Clara looked up from her wheelchair, eyes rimmed red from sleepless nights. "The company is bleeding, Ethan. Maybe Nathan was right about one thing. Maybe I was never meant to lead." He leaned against the balcony railing, shaking his head. "You are wrong. You stood up when everyone else hid behind numbers and excuses. That is leadership." She gave a faint smile. "It does not feel like it." Ethan poured her coffee and handed it to her. "You cannot rebuild a company overnight, but you can start by rebuilding yourself." His words sank in slowly. Outside, the winter wind rustled against the glass. Clara looked toward the skyline, the same city that once watched her fall and now watched her rise again. The following week, she announced a new initiative, the Wynne Foundation for Mobility, dedicated to designing affordable, accessible technology for people with disabilities. The press conference was smaller than the last, quieter, more personal. Ethan stood in the back of the room, wearing a clean jacket that still somehow looked like it belonged to a mechanic. When Clara finished her speech, the room erupted in applause. She scanned the crowd until her eyes found his. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The noise, the cameras, the history. There was only him, the man who had helped her believe she could stand again, even when she could not. Later that evening, he visited her office. The tension that had lived between them for months finally broke into stillness. "I should thank you," she said softly. "Without you, I might never have found the strength to fight." He smiled. "You always had it, Clara. You just forgot where you put it." She laughed quietly, tears glinting in her eyes. "You are infuriating, you know that?" He stepped closer. "So I have been told." The silence stretched, warm and electric. "Ethan," she whispered, "I do not know what happens next. I do not even know if I can love again." He reached for her hand, his touch steady. "Then let us start there, one day at a time." "Oh?" Outside, the city lights flickered like 1,000 small promises. The two of them stood together by the window, one woman who had reclaimed her life, and one man who had taught her how to believe in it again. For the first time, the future did not scare Clara Wynne. It glowed ahead of her, fragile but bright, like sunrise after a long storm. Spring arrived in Chicago with the scent of rain and the promise of renewal. 6 months had passed since the scandal, and Wynne Motors had begun to heal under Clara Wynne's leadership. The new division of the company, the Wynne Foundation for Mobility, was already producing its first prototype wheelchair, one designed for both strength and beauty. Its name, embossed in silver on the side, read, Phoenix. The day of the unveiling ceremony was bright and clear. Guests filled the grand atrium of the company headquarters, where banners fluttered with the words "Innovation with Humanity." Reporters stood ready, cameras focused on the stage where Clara sat at the podium. Her posture was steady, her voice confident. 6 months ago, she began, this company nearly lost its soul. But what defines us is not our mistakes. it is how we rise from them. Phoenix was built by engineers, by dreamers, by people who believe mobility is a right, not a privilege. And today, I dedicate this design to everyone who refused to give up. Applause filled the hall. In the front row sat Ethan Cole, wearing a suit that made him look slightly uncomfortable but proud all the same. When her eyes found his, her voice softened. And to the person who reminded me that broken things can be rebuilt stronger than before. After the ceremony, she rolled down the ramp toward him as photographers crowded around. "You clean up well," she teased. He grinned. "I could say the same about you. You were incredible up there." She smiled, handing him a small velvet box. "Open it." Inside was a single glove, old, worn, and stained with a faint trace of oil. The same one he had left behind months ago when he first repaired her chair. Beneath it, a brass plaque read proof of faith. Ethan looked up, eyes glistening. "You kept this?" "I kept it because it reminded me that kindness can change the course of a life," she said. "I want this displayed in the Foundation's lobby. A reminder that healing begins with compassion." He closed the box carefully, his voice thick. "Clara, you do not owe me anything." She shook her head. "I do not. But I choose to give you everything anyway." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The world outside the glass walls shimmered with sunlight. Then Ethan reached into his pocket and revealed a small silver ring, simple and unadorned. "Then maybe start with saying yes," he whispered. Clara's breath caught. Her eyes filled with tears, but they were not from pain. "You know I cannot stand for long," she said, smiling through the emotion. He knelt gently beside her. "Then I will meet you where you are." The crowd around them faded into quiet as she nodded. "Yes, Ethan Cole." The applause that followed felt like a tide washing through the room, soft and endless. Months later, in a sunlit courtyard near Lake Michigan, they held a small wedding surrounded by friends, employees, and patients from the Foundation. Clara walked the final few steps down the aisle with the help of her custom-made brace, one designed by her and built by Ethan. When they said their vows, her voice trembled, but did not falter. "You did not just fix my chair, Ethan. You helped me fix my life." He smiled, his eyes shining. "You were never broken, Clara. You were just waiting to rise." As they kissed, the crowd erupted in cheers. The wind carried the sound over the water, mingling with laughter and the soft hum of engines from the city beyond. Clara Wynne had lost everything once, her strength, her company, her faith, but in rebuilding, she found something far greater. She found love, purpose, and proof that even from the wreckage of the past, a new life could take flight.